So, hello. It's a different day for you. Same day for me, as I talked about in the last episode. Unless you're Patreon members, then this is the same day uh, for this video because I'm gonna put them both out on the Patreon. So there's another reason to, go put a few bucks so you can see some content a little early. I'm going to try to do that with all the content, is you'll be able to see the stuff that I'm doing before I post it. And as I get a little more work on some of the less complex projects, the less of the feature-length film, um, then you'll be able to see kind of what I'm working on and where I'm going with things. So as I develop much more of a system for these projects. On that note, if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see from a Patreon account, let me know, even if you don't want to be a subscriber, because that would help me greatly. But I guess today's topic is this concept about capitalism and socialism, and kind of a little bit of a very surface reflection of how I think about that stuff. And I'm not a political scientist. I study political science, but I'm not a political scientist. I'm a filmmaker, storyteller, educator, an artist and a performer. So I don't know why I did the Bush thing. But to me, the most important place, I guess whenever you're talking about politics or policies or even philosophy, I guess in that general, I think you want to start on a touchstone, something, a common place. And so for me, politically, there's a couple of them. Specifically relating to today's conversation would be the idea of not coercion or telling people what to do. You can kind of see this in a similar light of the libertarians' idea of the non-aggression principle. This idea of let me do me and I let you do you. Everybody's happy as long as we're not infringing on each other. All that good stuff. I think one of these days I just need to do like a little short videos describing a specific word or concept. But I think the first check for me on a political concept, an idea of philosophy, is whether or not to get it to work, you need to force people or coerce people into doing it. I believe as long as people are willing to do something and want to do something, be it by themselves or together, more power to you, unless you're hurting somebody else or infringing on somebody else's ability to do things. There's definitely a gray zone for that. But when it's relations to capitalism and socialism, the reason why I lean more towards the capitalist side, and I guess specifically industrial capitalism, which is kind of what we're working in roughly. It's about how consumer markets, I can't remember if it's Hume or Locke or whoever said it, it has to do with how the markets are driven, and it's from the Industrial Revolution, gets its name, but we're just going to say capitalism. To me, capitalism is the freer option for the individual. You do not have to play in a capitalist game. You don't, in the capitalist economic setting, you do not have to participate to be able to do what you want to do. It's not a requirement. There are caveats to that, but you don't have to. You do not have to. There are definitely some serious there are some serious disbenefits or problems if you don't want to play the game. You can be taken advantage of. If you're not an active participant in capitalism. And this, I think, goes to democracy as a whole. If you're not an active participant, you can lose your rights and all this other stuff and be disenfranchised, and be taken advantage of. So in both uh, democracies and capitalism, you need to be an active participant if you want to not be taken advantage of effectively. But if you play the game, you have uh, better opportunities, I think, than any current system or system in the past that humanity's developed. And so that's why I guess I align myself more with those values. Where I think as socialism, I think you can have socialistic concepts and ideas, but I think as an overarching system, you can't have other things play inside of socialism. Or socialism, you can have socialistic things inside of a system like capitalism. Uh, a great example is the unions. But this is, on that point, is also one of my issues. Not that I'm completely against unions. I think that unions have a lot of power, and I think the workers of anything should be able to collectively bargain and all this great stuff. But I think my biggest problem with unions is when an established organization kind of runs things and tells people, if you want to do this kind of job, you have to be union. And that's where I start to take a problem, because the union can then just take advantage of you. And instead of your employer taking advantage of you, it's the union. And so I think, like, if I was to be a part of the union, I would want to be an active member. I would want that community to be localized. I don't want it to have some regional or national or whatever influence. I want it to just be to deal with these problems in this specific job. And I think that's how it should work. I don't think, like the grocery store union, well, we're all part of the grocery store union, so we're going to collectively bargain. No, I think it should be more in-house kind of thing, personally. I think those are much better. You get to have the better understanding of the environment, and it's flexible. And I think that's great and wonderful, But I think some of the problems with the unions goes into why I think a socialist economic system would be bad is what makes how unions work is it requires the majority or more, if not all, the people to be on the same page. And so members of that are effectively forced into that practice, if that's what it requires, as I just mentioned. Or you may disagree, but the majority, mob mentality kind of thing, which is a problem in democracies as a whole, and it's not something we can solve, that we've solved yet. Because I don't want to be like, you all have to vote, you all have to do this, that's where problems start, I think, is I think rules in general should just be a base template, right? And you break one of those rules, we should investigate that incident and be like, okay, well, why did this rule get broken? How did it get broken? All that kind of stuff. Yeah, it could slow up things, but I'd rather have less guilty people. I'd rather have I'd rather have less innocent people charged with something, I guess. That's another topic, I guess, as well. But, that's part of the problem with communism is you're required to be a part of the party. And you can't play a different game in there. Now, I think if we want to make a better economic system than capitalism or socialism, we need to figure out how to do that. People think that, some hybrid between capitalism and socialism is the way to go. But what they don't realize is that's already where we're at. and we have been for 90 years. Whenever the big deal, like FDR came in, and the 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 whole recession and the 30s and the stuff like that, that resulted in the ideas of socialists coming in, the things that work. That's how capitalism works, is it takes the ideas that work and uses them to better whatever is happening. And so capitalism isn't perfect, honestly. You know, people can be taken advantage of, but you gotta play the game. Now, how do you play the game in capitalism? That's the real question. I think today especially, it's a lot about your identity, and that's disconcerting, because I feel like if you're trying to, I guess, play this game and you're using your identity, your race, your sex, your whatever, to politically motivate to play, I guess, society's game, then it's an easy way to distance yourself from others in that same category. Like saying, you know, if you're a man and you're like, well, we need to do this for men, it's easy to demonize the other camp, women in this case, by having that class struggle. Now, this is where I would disagree, especially with revolutionary socialists and communists and Marxists and stuff like that, is this idea of revolutionary and aggressive ways of making change happen. Revolutionaries, yeah. That's, to me, really problematic, because it goes against that. Well, what if, you know, yeah, you may not like it, and some other people may not like it, but they deal with it or whatever, and it's not a majority. Like, if the majority of the people in the United States wanted socialism, it would have happened. Yes, there's propaganda and how that all works, and it's really hard because our system isn't neatly, parsimoniously broken up so where you can see some of these things. I think that's part of the problem too with our political arrangement and our economical arrangement and our ethical and moral arrangements in our society, is where do these people stand? Who, you know, there are arbiters of these things, and some play more than one realm, and it's like, well, when are you putting on your political hat versus your moralizing hat? And then that's the problem. I feel like politics, I guess, specifically economic and social issues, or I think we at one point, this is where I'm gonna end. Political science started in economic sciences, and they were ripped apart. And I think there was talk a couple years ago about those two fields re-merging. And that's an interesting concept. Like, we have economic policies, and then we have social policies, the moral and ethics of our society, and how do those all play together? And I think that's the question that we need to work on. So I'm going to end it here. Don't forget to follow me on the Twitters, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, and the Facebooks. And DeviantArt. You're going to find all of those things at Methos 3H, Methos 3H. I think it's even my Steam account. You friend me on Steam. And if you got the chance, you know, go over to Patreon. You can follow me on Patreon. That's a good way until I get my website up and running, to kind of keep track of it all. It's kind of like the conduit right now. I am doing a lot of stuff on Instagram, so if you like photos, I really like communicating. It's a lot easier for me than typing all the junk. But yeah, think about being a Patreon. You know, the money can really help. So, I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.